when football was closer to a street fight than a sport. Back then, Sunday football looked nothing like what you see now. It was factory workers, dock hands, and salesmen taking one day off from steel mills and rail yards to smash into each other on muddy, frozen fields. No domes, no perfectly painted turf, just bare patches of dirt, ankle-deep sludge, and a ball that almost never left the ground. The forward pass was rare or outright illegal. Offense wasn't timing and spacing. It was a human battering ram. 11 bodies in a pile pushing, twisting, clawing for inches. It wasn't strategy, it was survival. The fans didn't come for precision, they came for blood. They wanted to see a man get folded, a pile erupt, a body left face down in the muck. If a player staggered to his feet or had to be carried off, that was part of the entertainment. Concussions weren't diagnosed, they were mocked. Broken noses, shattered teeth, ribs caving under mass tackles. The crowd roared, the players lined up again, and nobody talked about long-term damage. You weren't paid to be safe. You were paid to be violent. Slowly, the money changed everything. Owners realized this wasn't just a rough pastime, it was a product. Tickets, radio, sponsors, real profit. And when something becomes a business, chaos turns into risk. Dead players, mangled stars, games turning into outright riots. Those weren't just tragedies, they were threats to the bottom line. So the league started tightening screws. First came basic structure, downs, distances, formations. Then came early safety rules, not because the NFL suddenly grew a conscience, but because it needed its best attractions alive and available. The sport was still brutal, still closer to rugby than modern football, but a shift had started. The league hadn't softened yet, but it had finally decided that violence needed limits if it was going to be sold to the country. And no position exposed that shift more brutally than the one the league decided to protect above all others: the quarterback. By the 1950s, the game looked more organized, but for a quarterback it was still open season. Watch old film of Johnny Unitas, Bart Starr, or Yat Tull. They stand tall in the pocket, release the ball, and then get drilled high, low, and late. Linemen club them in the head. Pass rushers pick them up and slam them into the mud. No flags, no outrage, just a shrug and a huddle. For the league, that brutality was acceptable as long as football was a regional sideshow. But once television money started flowing and those quarterbacks became national stars, everything changed. When Johnny Unitas missed time, ratings dipped. When Joe Namath limped through games on a wrecked knee, the league saw its future limping with him. If your stars are in the training room, your product is on life support. So the rulebook started to bend. First came the basics. Face masks became mandatory, then blows directly to the face and helmets started drawing personal fouls. What used to be finishing the play slowly rebranded as roughing the passer. You could still hit the quarterback, but you could not hit him whenever and however you wanted. Then the pass rush changed the math again. Defensive ends like Deacon Jones made a living by literally slapping offensive linemen and quarterbacks in the side of the head. He called it the head slap. One violent strike to the ear hole, the blocker's vision went white, and the next step was a free run at the passer. It was legal, it was devastating, and it left too many players staggering. By the late 1970s, the league finally banned the head slap outright, an early admission that you could not keep selling football if you kept letting people weaponize the skull. At the same time, the league rewired how offense was allowed to protect the quarterback. In 1978, pass blockers were finally allowed to extend their arms and use open hands instead of keeping their elbows tucked in. That single change turned offensive tackles into true bodyguards. It meant they could catch, steer, and absorb speed instead of just absorbing punishment. Wide receivers also got protection, illegal contact after 5 yards, which forced defenses to cover instead of mug and kept quarterbacks from being hit on every slow-developing route. Put it together and the picture is clear. From the 50s through the 70s, the NFL quietly moved the quarterback from target to asset. Late hits became roughing. Head slaps disappeared. Pass blocking became a real craft instead of a beating. Out of that evolution came the modern T-shaped pocket, 5 linemen forming a horizontal wall with backs and tight ends dropping in as the vertical stem. The whole structure exists to hold a clean space for one man to stand, read, and throw. The league wasn't done tightening protections. The later rules about low hits, sliding quarterbacks, and defenseless status would push things even further. But this was the foundation. Once the rulebook and the line in front started treating the quarterback like protected property, defenders had a choice: stop being violent, or move that violence somewhere else. By the 2000s, the foundation was already set. Quarterbacks were stars, pass blocking was real protection, and the forward pass had become the league's main product. Week 1, 2008. Tom Brady takes his drop, plants and fires. As he follows through, defender Bernard Pollard dives at his legs from the ground. Helmet high, pads high, but the hit lands low, right into Brady's knee. He goes down and stays down. Torn ACL. Season over on the first Sunday. The league didn't just lose a quarterback, it lost the face of its product for an entire year. The next offseason, the rulebook changes. If a defender is already on the ground, he can no longer lunge or dive into the quarterback's legs. A shot that used to be just football becomes automatic roughing the passer. The message is simple and brutal. You do not take out the league's stars at the knees anymore. Less than a decade later, it happens again. 2017, Green Bay versus Minnesota. Quarterback Aaron Rodgers rolls right. Linebacker Anthony Barr hits him clean by old standards. Drives him into the turf and lands full weight across his chest and shoulder. Legal for most of NFL history. But Rodgers gets up with a broken collarbone, and another season built around a superstar quarterback evaporates in one snap. The reaction is immediate. Now defenders are told they cannot finish through the quarterback with their full body weight. They have to roll off, brace with their arms, or somehow redirect momentum at full speed. Land square and drive him into the ground, and you donate 15 yards and maybe your paycheck in fines. Stack those changes on top of the slide rules and defenseless language. The moment a quarterback starts a feet-first slide, he becomes a defenseless player. Any high or late contact is unnecessary roughness. On the sideline, even a chest-high hit after he eases up draws a flag. On scrambles, hits to the head and neck are automatic penalties and launches can get you ejected. The result is clear: you cannot hit him late, you cannot hit him high, you cannot hit him low, you cannot land on him. And once defenses understood that the true hunt for the quarterback was over, they started looking somewhere else to spend that violence. Down at the knees of linemen, up into the ribs of receivers, and into every blind side the rulebook hadn't closed yet. Football didn't soften because people complained. It softened because certain hits were so violent, so public, and so undeniable that the league had no choice but to act. These hits changed the game. Jack Tatum delivers a shot on Darryl Stingley that leaves Stingley permanently paralyzed. It wasn't illegal, it was football. And that was the problem. The aftermath forced the NFL to confront the brutality aimed at receivers. This hit became the emotional backbone for the league's first real defenseless receiver protections. The league didn't ban the play outright, but it began restricting spearing, helmet contact, and high-angle hits that targeted exposed receivers. This hit didn't just injure a man, it carved the phrase unnecessary roughness into modern football. Before quarterbacks became protected assets, defenders like Deacon Jones built careers by smacking linemen and quarterbacks across the earhole. The head slap wasn't dirty, it was a technique, but it left players stumbling, disoriented, concussed, and the league eventually banned it. It became one of the earliest official acknowledgments that head trauma wasn't just part of the game, it was a problem the NFL could no longer ignore. This was the first time the league took violence off the table, not because it hurt the game, but because it hurt the players. Hines Ward catches Keith Rivers on a blindside crackback, shattering Rivers' jaw. It was legal at the time, perfect technique. Shoulder through the chest, head up, full speed. But the brutality was undeniable. The hit went viral, the injury made headlines, and the NFL moved immediately. The next season, the league introduced the blindside block rule, banning high-speed crackbacks where the blocker leads with the shoulder or helmet to the head or neck of a defender. This is exactly the kind of downhill blow described in The Blindside Crosser Kill Mechanics. Violent, sudden, and catastrophic if mistimed. Ward's hit didn't break the rules, it created them. Or when Logan Thomas catches a ball over the middle, he's drilled high by a launching defender. Reviewed, ruled a launch, and the defender is ejected. Moments later, Kyle Hamilton delivers a helmet-to-helmet blow on another play and gets tossed as well. These aren't isolated accidents. They are the poster hits for the NFL's modern defenseless receiver policy. Leave your feet, rise into the helmet line, hit a defenseless target, and the rulebook detonates. 15 yards, automatic foul, ejection. These plays mark the moment the NFL turned launch plus high contact into a fast-track exit from the field. Kickoffs used to be the most violent plays in football, 40-yard runways ending in head-on collisions. The tape is full of torpedo hits where coverage arrives at full speed and drills a returner at the catch point, exactly the kind described in the special teams torpedoes segment. The league finally snapped. The three-man wedge was banned in 2009. The running start was shortened. Blocking rules tightened. More changes followed every few seasons. You don't rewrite the entire kickoff structure unless the hits are brutal enough to terrify the league's lawyers. In 2013, running backs lowering the crown to blow up defenders produced some of the hardest collisions ever recorded. Full-speed head-down torpedoes exploding into cornerbacks. These hits weren't mistakes. They were coached, but after enough highlight reel crown-to-helmet shots ended with players motionless on the turf. Now, offensive players and defenders are forbidden from initiating contact with the crown outside the tackle box. The goal was simple: eliminate head-down collisions before they eliminated careers. These hits didn't just break bones, they broke the illusion that football could remain a free-for-all and still survive as a business. Quarterbacks took the first protections, receivers took the next, special teams was rebuilt from the ground up, and the strike zone, that narrow window from shoulders to ribs, became the only place defenders can live. Every rule the NFL writes starts the same way: a violent hit, a hurt player, a public reaction, and a league trying to save its product without erasing the sport, where the violence went after the quarterback. The rulebook wrapped the quarterback in bubble wrap, so defenders pushed the damage downward and outward, to knees, ribs, and blind sides. You see it in 4 brutal forms. First were the low chop and the bad landings. The nastiest hit on a field often doesn't sound like anything. A defender goes low on a tight end like David Njoku, shoulder into the thigh just above the knee, textbook by modern teaching. Njoku flips, legs over helmet. He lands neck first, his own body weight driving his spine into the turf. The crowd doesn't roar, it gasps. There's no flag, no roughing, no helmet contact, just physics doing what physics always does when a 250-pound body is inverted and dropped. That's the trade the league made. You can't spear a quarterback in the helmet anymore, but you can take the legs out from under backs, tight ends, and receivers. Aim too low and you shred an ACL. Catch just above the knee and you flip a grown man into a bad landing that can end a season in silence. The contact itself is legal. The ground finishes the hit. The NFL cleaned up the high shots. The low ones never went away. I think we all remember the blindside crosser kill. Shallow crossers and slants are supposed to be easy money. 3 yards, ball out, keep the offense on schedule. They're also setup routes for a car crash. The receiver runs across the field with his eyes locked on the ball. His back is half turned to the defense. He never sees the safety sitting in the middle of the field, reading the quarterback's eyes, waiting for that route to enter the window. Then it happens, near foot in the ground, full speed downhill, shoulder through the near chest. You've seen versions of it, a receiver like Juju Smith-Schuster on a shallow crosser, and a safety who knew the play was coming all week detonates him the instant the ball touches his hands. Or a drag route where the ball is just a hair late and the defender arrives on the catch instead of the tuck. Executed perfectly, it's clean. Head off the midline, no launch, contact buried in the ribs. Executed inches too high and it's helmet to helmet on a defenseless receiver, automatic 15, and maybe an ejection. Either way, the message is clear. If you can't blow up the quarterback anymore, you blow up the man who dares run across his face. Then came the hospital ball and the CTE era of high throws, higher prices. The most vicious hits in today's game start with the quarterback. A hospital ball is simple: a slant, seam, or dig thrown too high over the middle. The receiver has to fully extend, arms up, ribs stretched, chin lifted. In that moment, he is legally defenseless. The rulebook literally labels him that way. Safeties live for that window. One step downhill and a shoulder through the chest can separate the ball from the body without ever touching the helmet. Tight end Logan Thomas secures a pass in traffic and takes a high shot. Replay shows launch plus contact into the head and neck, and the defender is gone. Kyle Hamilton lowers into a helmet-to-helmet collision on a stretching receiver and is tossed immediately. Same concept every time. Quarterback hangs his guy out. Receiver stretches. Defender arrives. The line between legal violence and a walk to the locker room is measured in inches. The league talks about CTE and player safety. But as long as balls hang high over the middle, defenders will step into that window and write the ending with their pads. Viewers still miss special teams torpedoes. Kick returns are where the old sport still lives. You've got 40 yards of runway for coverage, a returner slowing down to catch or cut. We've seen an all-pro returner like Keyshawn Nixon get blasted the instant he secures the ball. Helmet flying, ball loose, bodies piling at midfield. The hit is perfectly legal. Shoulder into the upfield chest, head out, near foot in the ground, drive through. The ball squirts free, the stadium detonates, and the offense never even takes a snap. But the same geometry that makes it beautiful also makes it lethal. Coverage is at full speed. The returner is decelerating. Any rise into the head and neck, any launch, and officials don't hesitate. 15 yards, and we've seen ejections on national games for high shots on kick coverage. The league shortened the run-up, it banned wedge blocks, it keeps tweaking kickoff rules. What it hasn't changed is this. Special teams still compress a season's worth of violence into one play. The quarterback's force field didn't end brutality. It just redirected it into knees, ribs, blind shoulders, and long runways. The next evolution is even uglier. When defenders realize if they can't destroy the play at the quarterback or the catch point, they can destroy it at the legs of the men protecting it. The hits that survive the rulebook still sound like car crashes. They're just aimed with sniper precision now. Modern defenses live in a strike zone that runs from the shoulders to the waist. No head, no knees, no late hits. If you want to erase a play, you have to do it inside that box at full speed with inches to spare. Same thing on the sideline. A receiver catches a deep out, turns upfield, and a corner who read it from the snap plants and fires through the numbers. No launch, no helmet, just pure force through the chest. The receiver goes horizontal, the sticks stop dead, and the flag stays in the pocket. It looks like a hit from the 1980s, but every detail is different. Hands are low, crown is out, and the strike lands exactly where the rulebook still allows destruction. Then there's the goal line collision, where 6 inches can erase 6 points. A tight end stretches for the pylon, ball extended, pads high. The defender reads it, drives downhill, and detonates the upfield shoulder and the football at the same time. The ball pops loose, skips through the end zone, and suddenly it's not just no touchdown, it's a touchback. The offense goes from almost 7 to absolute 0 in one hit. The scoreboard swings because the defender landed a textbook strike inside the legal window and used the boundary as a second tackler. This is what modern brutality looks like. See it early. Close under control, plant the near foot, drive the shoulder through chest or lower ribs, keep the head out, run the feet on contact, rise a few inches into the helmet line, and the same hit becomes unnecessary roughness or an ejection. Aim too low and you're cutting into knees the league is finally trying to protect. The physics don't change. The consequences do. Defenses still want to send a message. They just have less room to write it. Land 3 or 4 of these strike zone shots in a game, and offenses start to shrink. Routes get shorter, quarterbacks stop hanging receivers out, yards after the catch disappear. The league can ban headshots and leg whips. It can't ban collisions that collapse a chest and flip a game inside the tiny space it still allows. And defenders are going to use every inch of it. The last place violence is allowed to live. Every era swears the game has gone soft. Old heads talk about Jack Tatum and the hit that paralyzed Darryl Stingley, and they say, you could never play like that today. They're right, because that collision helped force the first real protections for receivers into the rulebook. Defensive linemen remember Deacon Jones and his head slap, one violent shot to the ear hole that turned blockers into stumbling targets. That move was legal until the league finally admitted you couldn't keep letting people weaponize the skull and call it technique. Modern fans point at the flags on Hines Ward's blindside jawbreaker, at ejections for high launches on Logan Thomas and Kyle Hamilton, at fines for crown of helmet hits and late shots on scrambling quarterbacks. They say, you can't hit anybody anymore, but you can. You just have to do it inside a shrinking box. The highlights haven't disappeared, they've just moved. Now the hardest hits are the low shot that flips a tight end like David Njoku and leaves him landing on his own neck. Legal form, catastrophic fall. The blindside crosser kill where a safety triggers downhill and detonates a drag route at the catch point. Chest hit, ball out, stadium shaking, replay crew double-checking the strike stayed out of the helmet line. The special teams torpedo that blasts an all-pro returner like Keyshawn Nixon the instant he secures the ball, shoulder through chest, ball on the turf, drive over before the offense even comes out. Same violence, new coordinates. The league carved out a tiny legal strike zone, shoulders to ribs, no launch, no crown, no knees, and told defenses, if you want to live here, you have to be perfect. So they train for that perfection. Near foot planted, shoulder through the chest, head off the midline, hands clamped, 2 steps through contact. Everything else, every inch too high, every slide too late, every launch too obvious, gets erased by flags, fines, or ejections. But the bodies don't care whether the ref threw a flag. To the player getting hit, clean still feels like whiplash and a ribcage caving in. To the guy whose knee just folded on a low chop, legal doesn't change the MRI. To the receiver waking up in the blue tent after a hospital ball, the slow-mo mechanics don't matter. Only the outcome does. That's the real story of the hardest NFL hits. In one era, they broke necks and ended seasons with no replay and no rules. In the next, they rewrote the rulebook and built a wall around the quarterback. Now, they live in the inches the league hasn't closed yet, at the knees, in the ribs, on runways where speed and timing decide whether you're on a highlight reel or in surgery. Every generation's biggest hits become the next generation's evidence in a safety meeting. The game keeps changing, the strike zone keeps shrinking, but as long as there's a whistle, a ball, and a scoreboard, there will always be one last place defenders can still hit as hard as the rules allow. And that's where the next hardest hit in NFL history is already waiting. If you want more stories of NFL greatness and heart, hit subscribe, drop a like, and stick around. The next chapter of football history is already waiting.